trade unions, it is hard. It is hard for trade unions to organise, and you know the things are hard, and you know it's the shame of this government, which has been in power for 12 years, that it hasn't got rid of the stuff that Thatcher brought in, and it's a shame, to be honest, that the trade union leaders, the trade unions who fund the Labour Party now more than ever, 70% or whatever of the funding for the Labour Party is provided by the trade unions, that they haven't insisted on it. So that I would certainly make that point. I also think that the trade unions do need to box clever. I actually used to work still for the local authorities. It wasn't a proper call centre, but it was a bit like it was a call centre operation, and it had a load of young workers, to answer your point, and they didn't have a trade union background, and none of them were in the trade union, but the management were quite heavy, and several of them got disciplined, and they joined the trade union on the spot, okay? And I represented them. I actually got in trouble with the union who said, you can't represent people who haven't been in the union for 3 months. I said, these people are losing their jobs, and we need to, and, you know, rest assured, some of those, we were successful in representing those people, and none of them left the trade union. And it went, and the trade union, as an organisation, as something to join, got a lot of positive publicity. So we need to box clever. We also, there's things like, why doesn't the trade union organise people who work differently? Carers are workers. Carers are workers. There are hundreds of thousands of carers are workers. Okay, and carers, even if they get a carer's allowance, get just over £50 a week. And yet they have to work 35 hours in order to get £50 a week. If they were on the minimum wage was low enough, they would be on over £200 a week. So why isn't the TUC, why isn't the union movement saying carers should be paid the minimum wage as a starting point? Can I just mention one other thing? Did anybody see that benefit cheats busters program? An awful programme in many ways. An awful programme. You know, one of these farm rule documentaries. But there was a salient moment, and I was astonished actually. The young reporter was talking to the woman who ran A2E. It was A2E, I think, and she A4E, which with her 6-figure salary and her big house in the country. And the young reporter said, I'm a bit worried, you know, because it seems that the jobs that you're driving people into are temporary, no fixed hours, and very casualised. And there was a long pause. I mean, a 10-second pause, and she said, yes, I am worried about that. Thank you for raising it, as if it had never occurred to her. Yes, when I speak to the Labour government, when I speak to the ministers again, I'm going to mention that too, because yes, it is disturbing, isn't it? And I thought it said it all about the approach of that particular organisation.
Incidentally, David Blunkett has a £30,000 a year contract with A4E as an advisor. And Emma Harrison, the owner, has an estate, at least £40 million, and an estate home, a stately home in Derbyshire. Talk about single parents who milk the money off the taxpayer.
Can we just see if there's any more questions? I think there was a couple of people who hadn't contributed yet. Yes, we'll take. I think it was this lady and then that gentleman at the back. So this lady, would you like to?
I just wondered, you know, how the panel as a whole feel the Green Party can strengthen and raise their game on this issue, especially vis-à-vis perhaps the citizens' income, and how we can get that message out to people that, you know, how the citizens' income works and how it could work for them to remove this absolute mess that's in place and being strengthened now.
And do you want to say your question now?
Yeah, it was kind of less of a question. I mean, I usually hate people who raise their hand for questions and then just want to give out a statement. So I'll let them be one of them. But I agree with you. I think it pays to be creative in trade union movements, and I think that's important to understand. And I think you highlighted some of those things, and I appreciate that. I think that's good work you're doing. One of the things I wanted to say, which struck me, was about those gentlemen who said, well, they've got into a spot of bother, and then suddenly they find the Sarkis trade union units they can and sign in. Because the thing is, I found in my experience with trade unionism here in this country, I find that there are some careerists in long-term jobs who, when they get into a little bit of bother, or when management decides they want to come down on people for no particular reason, suddenly people will join up a union, and then a couple of months later they all kind of like fade off. And I think maybe I think that has to be acknowledged. And I certainly understand some trade union heads who would say, well, hey, the guy isn't that on it. But I understand the principle of defending workers. But I think there's some other traditions that can be looked at. And the thing is, in the Italian trade union movement, and it's really interesting, and I've seen this lots of times, where the trade union membership will be tiny. And I think it's a lot of times it doesn't necessarily relate into like a governmental figure. There is no sort of formal labor party or something. But when there's a strike on, it's like everybody's out. So it's very interesting. And I think we sort of see this a lot, like when it came to the workers in the windmill factory, or when we, in some of the other things. There tends to be a lot more sort of all out kind of going on. But I definitely think that the mechanisms of trade unionism are really important. Obviously you do as well. And I just tend to think that there are reasons for these kind of, I would call them sort of recidivant people. There are guys who are trade unionists only when it suits them. When somebody else is in hot water, they're not out for it. And I think this is a big problem I've found. So that was my thoughts with what you said.
No more questions. So, Joseph, yeah?
Yeah, I just want to come back to what Peter was saying earlier about the role of the trade union group, because you know, several of us did go to the lobby of Parliament organised by the PCS, and we actually heard some shocking things there from some of the MPs who were on the committee investigating the bill. And there was one MP who said that witnesses who were often disabled people, or you know, people with low incomes or whatever, had actually been mocked by Labour and Tory MPs sitting on the committee, and actually laughed at them and just ridiculed them. And I think this is indicative of the sort of thing that's come up recently, where you have people like Alan Duncan talking about, you know, I have to live on the scraps, nobody can live on 64k a year and so on. I mean, the complete and utter political divide, economic divide between the people who are actually making the legislation, who have no experience at all of anything, like the levels of poverty which people have to go through. And you know, it's totally beyond their ken. But one thing that I have observed as an officer of the trade union group and an activist in the Green Party is that the Green Party is very quick to react when there's an industrial dispute which has a green dimension. Vestas, for example. I mean, I completely support the Vestas campaign. But then we get elected representatives acting very quickly, calls for people to go down and campaign and all the rest. We don't get the same urgency of action in relation to other areas, like welfare, you know, other industrial disputes. I mean, to give credit to Jean Lambert in London, she has been very active and very supportive of the migrant workers. And that they are one group, for example, who are joining trade unions. It's a growth area. I think the trade unions have recognised that. But I don't think enough activists or elected representatives react. They see an environmental issue that has a trade union dimension, yes.